Negotiation is something that a lot of people shy away from because they see it as being confrontational. And ultimately, yes, there's always going to be friction if you're trying to do a deal or you're going to arrive at something. Why? Well, you're going to have your personal lenses through which you're looking, and the other side are going to have theirs and their agenda that they're working to. And it's very rare that those things are going to align immediately. And so if they're not aligned, it's going to create friction, which, as I say, for many people is a red flag, and they don't like conflict. And it's something, unfortunately, you need to deal with. And it's not conflict. You've got to reframe it. It's just negotiation, and that's what it is. But there is friction when you negotiate. It's not conflict. It's just friction. Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show. This week we are talking about the art of negotiation. It is one of the most important skills, whether that's as an employee, as a business owner, or indeed as an investor. Learning the art of getting the deal done is crucial. Plenty of practical examples in here, as well as the theory that sits behind it. So as always, make sure you take plenty of notes, but most importantly, make sure you take plenty of action. Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show with me, your host, Andrew Baxter, and as always, my offsider and co-host, Mitchell Olarenshaw.
AB, we're going to love this episode, as I'm sure our listeners will, because it's one of our favorite personal topics, as I know both of us quite well, and that is, of course, the art of negotiation, but importantly, furthering your career and your investments.
Look, deal making or negotiating is crucial. It's the most important lens to look through, and it can exacerbate and amplify really good values and a really good direction. And equally, it can be quite a damaging force for carnage if it's used in the wrong way too. So
that's right.
There's a moral frame on this. Learn skills and use them for the right reasons in the right way. 100% rather than exploit them.
Absolutely. Let's talk about firstly the importance of negotiation. Now, you and I both have had experience in this space, which we'll talk about later on in the episode. But for our listeners out there, why is it so important?
Negotiation is something that a lot of people shy away from because they see it as being confrontational. And ultimately, yes, there's always going to be friction if you're trying to do a deal or you're going to arrive at something. Why? Well, you're going to have your personal lenses through which you're looking, and the other side are going to have theirs and their agenda that they're working to. And it's very rare that those things are going to align immediately. And so if they're not aligned, it's going to create friction, which, as I say, for many people is a red flag, and they don't like conflict. And it's something, unfortunately, that you need to deal with. And it's not conflict. You've got to reframe it. It's just negotiation, and that's what it is. But there is friction when you negotiate. It's not conflict. It's just friction.
Nothing personal, just business, right?
Well, if it's conflict, there's going to be no negotiation. It will break down and you walk away. So it's got to be something that's in a respectful way with a very designated outcome that either side are looking for, and you're going to meet somewhere. I think either on their line, your line, or somewhere in between.
And no one ever walks away perfect. No two parties both ever walk away happy.
No one's happy, but the question is making sure that you're as least unhappy as you can be in those circumstances. I think would be the lens to look through.
I think it's important too for our listeners is that if you are looking to further your career, negotiation is one of the key aspects. If you can provide value to an organization, you're in every right to then negotiate, because what's good for the business, therefore, then has to be good for yourself, right?
Correct. And we're in a world, I think, and I'll be kind of minded as to how I couch this, where there's an above average amount of entitlement that's out there. People seem to look through, I'm entitled to this. And it's one of the best lines from House of Cards from Kevin Spacey. You are entitled to nothing.
I can just picture him saying that too.
It's a pretty harsh line. But you've got to not feel that you're entitled to something, and you've got to kind of work for it is very, very important. And I've always been of the view, and I guess it's the industry I've been in for my entire career, that, for want of a better word, you eat what you kill. If you're profitable in what you do as a trader, you make money. And if you're not profitable, then you're going to struggle.
Totally.
So there's an emphasis on being good at what you do. You can't say, well, I'm entitled to more money because I'm not good at what I do. It doesn't work like that in this industry. And I guess, really for me, that's the DNA that I have, having been in this space for such a long time now.
Got you. Well, let's get into the nitty gritty, AB. How do you prepare for a negotiation with respect to career?
Look, I think you've got to prepare. That's the first thing. A lot of people will just amble in and sit down and get broadsided and walk out having been put through the mincer, settling for what they've been given. And, you don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. And again, that's such an important thing. So I've been working really hard, so I deserve this. There's the entitlement mindset. No. Now is your time to sit there and pitch. To me, as you've done
many times.
This is what I'm doing. This is the value add I bring to the business. This is the revenue line that I've created, and this is what I believe I should be remunerated because of that. And it's an absolute, because you can measure it. You can see in this industry,
there's value first and negotiation second, right?
And look, this is a lot different if you're in other industries. So let's say, for example, my sister-in-law's a nurse, my in-laws were both teachers, and that's a very different situation because pay awards typically aren't based on merit. It's just how long you've been in the job, which unfortunately keeps a lot of people in those jobs that maybe aren't as competent or as enthusiastic as people that work harder. They get nothing more for it. But we can only speak to the industry experience that we have. So I think you've got to be prepared. You've got to go in there and lay out your case as to what you believe that is yours to argue for. And the other side, which in your case is me, will argue their side of the coin to say, this is where I see things. And that's where then the negotiation starts. And asking questions, I think, is very, very important, because that's where conversation then starts. Because if you're in opposite corners of the ring, you go, well, this is my position and this is mine,
you're never going to get anywhere.
You can say, well, can I ask, why do you hold that view? Why do you believe that? And then all of a sudden, and that's a really useful disarming technique to use. So why do you believe that? If I can ask, help me understand why you believe that, because make it easier for us to negotiate now.
Yep.
Oh, well, and then someone starts to talk. And when they start to talk, they're going to reveal where their agenda typically sits, which is then going to give you the ability to go, okay, I kind of see where they're coming from. And that's a hot button for them. Okay, so let me get this right. You're saying from your perspective, you see this from there. So again, when you do this in the most basic form of negotiation, all you're doing is rephrasing what they've just told you. And they're going to go, yes. And now we're in agreement. So that conflict is eased off some. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you mentioned blah is something that's really important to you. Have I got that right? You have. That's something that's really important to me, and that's why I feel this way. Okay, so if we were able to park that to the side, can we talk about some of the other things? And so what you've effectively done is moved the big obstacle out of the way. You can make some progress and maybe negotiate a little more of what you're after. And they're probably likely to give you more of a concession because the thing that's really important to them is taken away for a while. And then when that's done, okay, so to summarize, we're here, you're there. Okay, that kind of works. Let's go back to this now.
Gotcha.
And then at least you've had some positive discussion and the relationship is much less confrontational. Not all negotiations are like that. And I've been in some really mega aggressive ones where people are almost prepared to go down with the ship. And there's no rationality to that. It's a very hard thing to do. But I think by finding out what actually is important to the other side. So, okay, you've mentioned that you feel that you're due this pay rise for these reasons. Why do you think that is? Well, I've done this, this, and this. Look, they're all part of your job to do. So they're expected. So yes, you have delivered on it, but that was expected. And then you can go, that's correct, these are, but this wasn't. This is something extra that I've done. But let's park that for a minute and talk about, based on what I've done that was expected, where that sits. And you're probably likely to find some common ground in there somewhere. Now, once you've got that common ground sorted out, right, let's bring that back in, because you mentioned I told you I've done this, which is outside of that. And that's really what I want to focus on. And I know you've got a view, so have I, so let's see if we can nut something out. But there's already positive momentum. You're not starting off cold. You're kind of, all right, we've considered a bit, you've got a bit, I've got a bit, and everyone's starting to move forward with it.
Yeah, there's two things that I would like to add to that. Is number one, if you are negotiating, be prepared that in order to receive, you have to give. And the only reason you're going to be paid more is because you've over-delivered and done extra things. And you have to be prepared to do even extra things beyond that in order to justify
way
more.
Beyond.
Way beyond.
Because then it's so far over the net that it's not like, oh, that's line ball. It's like, nah.
Exactly.
It's unequivocal what's actually happened here.
And secondly, for our listeners, this is really basic, but don't ambush your boss and say, hey, can I quickly chat to you, and then try and negotiate. Big thing, send an email a couple of weeks in advance. Hey, I would like to discuss X, Y, Z. And then no one is caught off guard.
Correct. That's the ethical thing to do. And, there's ethical negotiation. And I think, to an extent, that's largely what we've talked about. And then there's the dark arts, which, and I've been involved in negotiations that are really not undertaken in a way that you would argue is the right way. And unfortunately, the art of a really good negotiation is that nobody's totally happy. And that doesn't sound like it's a really positive outcome, but that actually is a really good outcome, because you have to take into account that there are stakeholders. So in an example, if you're an employee, your agenda is going to be purely about you making sure you earn more money. If you're the manager, it's going to be justifying the pay awards within your business to make it profitable or happy staff retention. And if you're the company, it's going to be the bottom line. And all three of those parties have to be not too unhappy. So there's going to be a compromise amongst all of those. If you just have this fight between two of the parties and the third one is neglected in there, well, they're a stakeholder in it and their needs haven't been taken into account. So they're going to be pretty unhappy about the whole thing. And when you have an unhappy, not a less happy party, but a really unhappy party, then that negotiation ultimately will break down because it's just not going to get signed off. So you have to be very cognizant that who are all the stakeholders in this conversation and what are the lenses that they're looking through, and then we can go from there. But if you neglect to take into account all the stakeholders, you miss out. I'll give you a very simple example of this. I've seen this in a sales negotiation where there was a husband and wife team, and the person negotiating the deal just talked to the husband and totally, other than a bit of lip service, really ignored the wife. She was the decision maker. And all of a sudden, that negotiation really broke down because they simply didn't have a platform. They just sat back and watched it go, no, this deal's not happening. But why? Because you haven't taken into account all the stakeholders that are here.
That's right, indeed.
So you've got to understand the territory in which you're playing as well. So that's some really broad-based stuff. And look, negotiation can be fantastic fun. Give to get. If I do, will you? I've done this. Can you do that? It's just this terrific game of ping pong. I love it. The best negotiator I know is my wife. Like she plays for keeps. She's very fair, and she's extremely layered and logical in what she does. But she's not for turning. Like if she's dug in, it's dug in, and it's usually because she's dug in for a pretty good reason. So I actually do enjoy watching. I'm normally the one that does most of it, or on the surface it would seem, in our house. But actually, my wife is just an absolute negotiating ninja.
Well, I think to some of our negotiations, I mean, it's always been a little bit hot under the collar, and then once the dust has settled, we kind of shake hands and say, that was good fun.
It's never personal.
Never.
And that, again, is something that in today's world, we talked about entitlement being one thing. And I think also taking things personally, nothing is really personal, and there are some alpha players to watch and learn from. And one of them is a terrific, and this is before your time, President Nixon did a series of interviews with David Frost, who was one of the world's biggest journalists at the time. I think it was in the early 70s, or maybe 80. And David Frost was used to interviewing everybody that was somebody on the planet. And Nixon was a particularly intelligent president, something that you could argue is potentially missing in the current electoral situation, at least partly over in the US. And they're just about to sit down and go live on their recording. And Nixon alphaed him. We just made a comment about his shoes, going, "Oh, they're really interesting shoes." He said, "Oh, thank you. They're from Italy." He said, "Yeah, I don't know. As a man, I think I'd probably struggle to wear those."
And that put the other guy on the back foot.
Literally seconds before the camera went live, and Frost is on the back foot straight away. And so those sort of situations of just trying to control the frame, and we've spent so much time playing the game of frame control because it's such an interesting space to be in, sets the tone for a negotiation. So, again, you mentioned about not ambushing somebody and using a time, doing it in a responsible way is very important because it removes the ability for the other side to use a time frame close on you, or the time frame. And for those people that aren't aware, like time frame or framing out of a conversation could be about time. So it's like, look, I'm really busy. I've only got 5 minutes. That's okay. This will only take 3. So I've just wrestled. You're not busy. I've just said that we can do it in less time than you said you had available. So I'm now controlling that time frame.
That's right.
And it's a really simple example of some of the art form of really, really good negotiation. And I think if you play the game ethically and you play it very transparently, you'll almost always get what you seek, albeit you won't be totally happy, but you'll be reasonably happy with the outcome. If you rely on frame control to get you there, it becomes a manufactured outcome where one or other of the stakeholders won't be happy at all. and that negotiation will break down. So these techniques are very useful to move your case forward. But I think playing a straight back ultimately
Just be honest.
is where to play. And I agree with you 100%. You just got to be brutally honest.
Just
with
be
this
honest.
sort of stuff. And if you're offended or you feel that you know, oh, that was a bit mean that you pulled that one out of the bag, don't be offended. Learn from it. You know, the only reason you're offended is because you weren't prepared. Frame control. Look, I'd love to go through it, so I've only got 5 minutes. That's cool. It'll only take 3. Just put the pin in the balloon of the control that person had in the conversation. So we better get started, hey?
That is a cracker. And we've used that. Well, we've seen it being used many, many times.
It's a master stroke, that one.
Totally.
There's plenty of others, moral frame. Yeah, there's a whole raft of these, and it's an art form learning.
Don't give away our secrets, AB. Come on, you've taught me too well. Let's go through some techniques that each of us have maybe used throughout our lives in practicing negotiation. Any that spring to mind for you?
Look, I think you've got to know your numbers if it's a business decision, and you've got to know what your bottom line position is. And
so if you're very much so quantified, you have the stats ready, the spreadsheets exactly done.
There are people that are able to make decisions on gut feel. And to an extent, I've been reasonably successful at that, but I like to know my numbers because ultimately, particularly if it's a business, you know, you need to know where your margins are. And if you take too much of a chomp out of your margins, it then stops to function as a business. And that becomes problematic for you. So, you know, that's an example. So you have to know your numbers. And like everything in life, no different to goal setting, you have to know what you want out of this. And you are going to be looking through polarized lenses because the person on the other side of the net is going to want X, you're going to want Y. They're oil and water until you work out what's really important and where the compromise point is. And, you know, there are all sorts of arguments, you know, never compromise, the great book, FBI Hostage Negotiator, the art of never compromising. You know, it's always a give to get. Look, I might be able to do that, but before I can do that, I'm going to need you to do this. Is that something you can do?
Yeah.
And it's a staller, and it's just getting them to step further towards the line. It is an art form. It doesn't even justify a podcast like this. I mean, we could talk about this and go
for
through
hours
and hours and hours of it.
Well, a piece of advice I would say, if I can add to this, is to practice negotiation outside of your actual employment. So I'm going to reveal a bit of skullduggery here that I used to partake in when I was a little bit younger. I loved negotiation and I also loved sales. So my way of practicing, this is sort of 18, 19, 20, is that I used to sell anything and everything at cash converters. So on the weekend, I'd go to my grandfather's house and say, what don't you want? And he'd say, I don't want that chair anymore. And it might be $20. Who cares? It didn't matter what it was. But I would purposely grab that chair, take it to cash converters and spend an hour there just negotiating with them and just practice everything I possibly can. You know what, I'll take it and sell it. Didn't want the money, didn't want anything else other than the practice. And it taught me so much because you had real world examples.
It's given you a great base for what you do. And yes, you work in professional services, but everything in business ultimately comes down to a sales process in some way, shape or form. And the art of selling, I think it's Trump's book, wasn't it? The Art of Sales, is crucial. And it's something a lot of people in professional services look down the nose at. I know I most certainly did in my early part of my career when, you know, we'd have people from the distribution, you know, financial advisors and marketing channel and all that sort of stuff. And it'd be, oh yeah, they just sell the stuff. You know, we make the money. They're the people that carry the bags. And it's like, it's actually the other way around, because if you don't have somebody to sell your product, you've got no business.
That's right.
And it's a really interesting frame to keep your feet on the ground in that regard. And that's really interesting. I didn't know that.
Different person, different product every single time you go there. And I used to have these heated negotiations for 45 minutes over $10. We'd finally come to a conclusion. I'd say, oh, guys, that was really fun. Thanks for that. And these people would just be spinning out like, who is this kid? I used to do it every weekend religiously, and it was so much fun.
It becomes addictive. It can become a game. I genuinely didn't know that, and it doesn't surprise me. And I think it's why you're able to relate to our clients, because you know that each one of them is different. They're the same but different. I had an interesting observation. I was in a shopping centre. This would be going back 20-something years with a buddy of mine. And this guy is worth a very, very substantial number. He's got his own private jet. He flies around on like a big private jet and other stuff like that. And his wife was with my then girlfriend shopping, which is a terrifying prospect because trust me, his wife knew how to shop. And we were in Foot Locker. He was a mad runner, this particular guy. And we're in Foot Locker, and he was negotiating with the sales guy in Foot Locker for nearly 2 hours to get, I don't know what the number was, maybe $10 off a pair of running shoes. And then the guy just crumbled. It's like, just like, I just
And
need
he
you out
got
of
the
my
win,
shop.
and
So
he would have been stoked.
He got the win. So we're walking back to catch up with the girls for a coffee or something. And I looked at him. I said, like, that was 2 hours. I said, I don't know what your hourly rate is. I said, but like, and he said, no, the reason I've been the success that I have is because I'm prepared to lock on to something and argue my corner sufficiently strongly that the other side will go, yeah, you've got a point. And even if it's getting my time back, so out of my life, so be it. And I said, but $10. I said, you could afford to buy this whole shopping centre. He said, I already own half of it. It was just this killer line. And it was like, yeah. And he said, and that's why, because it's the details that matter, the dollars and cents that matter. And he said, for me now, it's just pure game, pure sport. Every transaction I get involved with, I do that. Another buddy of mine, similar but different story, on any purchase for the business. Very, very successful businessman and someone I've got immense respect for. Was a very important mentor for me in my early days in Australia, and just a dead set good person. They'd do a deal, whether it be with a printer or a venue for something or whatever it might be, and they'd get the quote through. And then his PA was trained up. Joanna's PA, her name was Joanne. Joanne would call the venue and said he signed off on it, provided that price includes GST.
Ooh, so a 10% discount every time
on everything.
Yep.
And I thought, gee, that's
smart.
That's really smart. And he's just sat there, just smiling every time. And I said, "Why are you smiling?" He said, "She's also worked out the game because when I started her working for me, I trained her that's the final. We've done the deal, we've negotiated, and then I just need that final haircut, just so I've got what I need out of it." And then she flipped the script on me. And she negotiated, said, well, obviously I'm saving you significant money every year by being able to do this, so I want a piece of the action.
Fair enough.
And he's good to his word. He was
fair enough.
And that's the thing. You don't
you
don't eat alone. And that's one of his great values. That's why I've got so much respect for him, is he was very, very good at that, at sharing the love. He was an absolute hard ass, like South African Jewish accountant combination. So really all about the numbers, all about the margin, and all about the principle. And then when the negotiation was done, he'd share the love. And that's a smart person, because
Indeed.
He had extremely loyal people. I'm talking about a guy I did stuff with 20 years ago, and I've still got immense respect for him in that business.
Got you. And as you always said to me, AB, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So for our younger listeners out there that I can resonate with, just have a go at it, any opportunity you get, because a lot of it does come down to confidence. If you don't ask, you aren't going to get.
From an employer's perspective, if you've got someone that's a runner, someone that's young and prepared to have a go, even if you don't get what you really set out for in that negotiation or the second one, the respect is much higher, because you've got someone that's not a pushover and they're not a yes person that just takes the little crumbs that have been thrown. They're prepared to fight for their corner. And as you well know, that's one of the many, many attributes I love about our team. And that's what I reward handsomely, as you well know. So, these are really important things for people to take out. And look, you can apply them in just the same way with an investment. I've done a property transaction. I remember talking to the agent, and I'm the master of lowballs, as you know. And
surprise.
I put this lowball in, said, yeah, that I'm not even, and I said, by law, you've got to present it. I'll put it in writing. You've got to go present it. So don't be acting on their behalf. You have to, by law, present the offer. They're never going to take it. I said, well, that's their decision, not yours.
Frame control.
And she's like, yeah, I know, but they're going to listen to my advice. And I said, but your advice is flawed if you're not going to obey the law, moral frame. And then it's like, okay, well, I'll put it to them. And she came back and said, yeah, they knocked it back. I said, well, thank you for asking them. And it's nice that they were able to make their own decision. And she said, did you want to counter? And I came back with exactly the same number, and then put a time frame on it. Cash unconditional, on or by a certain date, or no bueno. Got the property.
Nice work.
Why? Because you put it out there. And if you don't put it out there, then it never happens.
That's right.
And there are going to be agents, I'm not talking about real estate agents, but there'll be agents or things that can sit between those two parties, you and the other side. And probably one of the best things in a negotiation is to try and get rid of them. So if you're doing a deal, business deal, there's going to be accountants, finance people, there's going to be lawyers in the room. And I think, the best deals you do are when you go, guys, can we have the room? And you actually talk to the other party one-on-one.
Gotcha.
And then say, right, we know where we're at now. You guys can then square up the deal. And, we've just been through something like this as a business, whereby the lawyer for the other side had to try and make his mark and alpha frame the situation and almost cost the deal. And it wasn't until we were able to establish a line of communication directly, not through the lawyer, with the other side, that we could talk very freely and say, this is what I need. This is what I need. Great. Well, look, does that work for you? Yeah, that works for me. Can we move the date to that? Yeah, that all works. Let's just get it done and tell the lawyer what he needs to do rather than let them negotiate, because they're not the people that have got skin in the game. They're just the professional services that are just dotting the I's and crossing the T's after the decision makers have finished making the decision. And that's something that's really important to understand. And it's so hard if you're new in the world, when we're talking about business deals now as opposed to pay or salary or work. But it's so easy to be intimidated when you go into a room and you've got all these people sitting around the table, and it's like there's only one person that's actually important as a decision maker, and they're just the people that will carry out those instructions. But to justify their fees, often they're going to try and inject themselves into, oh no, you can't say that. This is it's like, with all due respect, we'll come back and let you know in a minute if you don't mind.
Got you.
And sometimes you've got to be quite direct. And I think that asking for the room and having the authority to do that is a huge one. It's like, can we have the room for 5 minutes, please, guys?
Indeed.
And it's like, you've asked them to leave, and guess what?
They will.
They go, and who's got the control of the frame?
You do.
And then you're talking to the other party and say, look, I'm glad they're out of the way. Tell me where you're at. What do you need?
Got you.
What do we need to do today to make this happen? You tell me what it is and we can work to it. They're just decoy runners that are causing smoke and mirrors. It's not going to get done. They're getting in the way. I want to get it done. You want to get it done. What do you need?
Indeed.
And it's that honesty, and that's how you get stuff done.
These are great tips, AB. I'd just like to ask you, what are you doing in 3 weeks at 11 a.m. on a Wednesday? You got some time?
3 weeks' time on 11 a.m. Do you know what? I'll be in Sicily, so if you want to come over there and have a chat, I'll be happy to accommodate you.
I'll be in Positano, so maybe we could book a flight.
You never know. How about that? We'll make it happen for sure.
Perfect. AB, thanks for the advice today. Really, really, really good. Thank you.
Anytime. My pleasure, Mitch. There you have it, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, hit the notification button, and we'll look forward to hosting you next week.